The grand chamber of the Galactic Council gleamed with crystalline walls that pulsed with bioluminescent light. Representatives from 1,000 worlds sat in their designated pods, their forms ranging from gaseous clouds to towering rock formations. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Chen Wei from Earth, holding a simple leash attached to a creature that had caused more controversy than any treaty in recent memory. The dog's name was Sergeant, a German shepherd with loyal brown eyes and a coat that had seen better days. He sat obediently beside Chen, his tail occasionally wagging despite the hostile atmosphere that filled the room. The ambassador could feel the weight of countless alien eyes upon them, some filled with disgust, others with pure confusion. Counselor Zixathera of the Crystalline Collective raised one of her many limbs, her voice resonating through the chamber's translation systems. "Ambassador Chen, we have tolerated many peculiarities from your species since Earth joined our coalition 3 cycles ago. Your insistence on liquid water, your chaotic sleep patterns, your bizarre need for physical contact. But this creature you insist on bringing to official proceedings crosses every line of decency." Chen straightened his posture, his hand instinctively moving to rest on Sergeant's head. The dog leaned into the touch, finding comfort in the familiar gesture. "Counselor, with all due respect, Sergeant is not merely a pet. He is a trained service animal, essential to my ability to function in high-stress diplomatic situations." A ripple of what could only be described as revulsion passed through the alien assembly. Lord Vexnar, whose species resembled massive floating jellyfish, pulsed an angry crimson color. "Service animal? We have examined your files, human. This beast serves no mechanical purpose. It does not enhance your biological functions. It does not extend your limited senses. It simply exists, consuming resources and producing waste." The ambassador felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his diplomatic composure. Sergeant, sensing the tension, pressed closer to his leg. The council fails to understand the complexity of human psychology. Sergeant provides emotional support, reduces anxiety, and helps me maintain focus during extended negotiations. His presence has actually improved Earth's diplomatic effectiveness by 37%. Counselor Thrin, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic field, spoke next. Her voice crackled with static interference. "Emotional support? Humans and their emotions? Your species is already considered unstable by galactic standards. Your mood shifts, your irrational attachments, your tendency toward violence when agitated, and now you bring a creature even more primitive than yourselves to our most sacred halls?" Chen could feel his temper rising, but decades of diplomatic training kept his voice level. "Every species in this chamber has their own methods of maintaining psychological balance. The Metharians require their meditation crystals. The Ulans need their hormone baths every 6 hours. How is Sergeant any different?" The question hung in the air for a moment before High Arbiter Zelmoth, the Council's supreme authority, spoke for the first time. His species, the Eternal Observers, rarely involved themselves in petty disputes, which made his intervention all the more significant. His ancient form, vaguely humanoid but composed of what appeared to be living stone, leaned forward on his throne. "The difference, Ambassador Chen, is aesthetic. Your creature is, by every measure of galactic standards, hideously ugly. Its asymmetrical features, the wet apparatus it uses to smell, those unsettling eyes that track movement with predatory intent. Worse still, it sheds biological material constantly, contaminates the air with its breath, and produces sounds that disturb sensitive species. Several representatives have filed formal complaints about their discomfort. Sergeant, oblivious to the discussion about his appearance, yawned widely, showing his teeth. Several counselors recoiled in their pods, and one of the whisper folk actually fainted, their ethereal form dissipating momentarily before reforming. Chen felt something inside him snap. "So this is what it comes down to? You're judging him on his looks? A species capable of faster-than-light travel, of manipulating dark matter, of existing in 11 dimensions simultaneously, and you can't see past the fact that my dog doesn't meet your beauty standards?" Counselor Zixathera's crystalline form chimed with agitation. "It is not merely about appearance, human. It is about standards, about civilization, about maintaining the dignity of this council. Your attachment to this primitive creature demonstrates exactly why humanity struggles to integrate with galactic society. You cling to your barbaric past instead of evolving beyond such base needs." The chamber filled with agreements, various aliens expressing their support through their species-specific methods. Lights flashed, scents were released, and quantum fluctuations rippled through the room. Chen realized with growing dread that he was losing this battle. High Arbiter Zelmoth raised one stone hand, and silence immediately fell. The Council has reached a decision. The creature-designated Sergeant is hereby banned from all Galactic Council facilities, diplomatic venues, and official Earth embassy spaces within Council jurisdiction. Furthermore, Ambassador Chen Wei, you are given a choice. Remove this animal from Council space within 1 standard day, or face removal from your ambassadorial position. Chen felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. You can't be serious. You're really going to end Earth's diplomatic representation over a dog? The High Arbiter's expression, as much as his stone face could convey one, remained impassive. The decision has been made. The creature's presence is incompatible with Council standards. You have 1 day to comply. As the Council session ended and the various representatives began to file out, Chen knelt beside Sergeant. The dog looked up at him with complete trust, his tail wagging slightly. He had no idea that the most powerful governing body in the galaxy had just declared him too ugly to exist in civilized space. I'm sorry, boy, Chen whispered, scratching behind Sergeant's ears. I'm so sorry. What neither Chen nor the Council could possibly know in that moment was that their decision to banish one ugly dog from their midst would set in motion a chain of events that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Sometimes the smallest decisions have the largest consequences, and sometimes those the powerful dismiss as worthless prove to be the most valuable of all. Sergeant, for his part, simply licked Chen's hand and waited patiently for whatever would come next, just as he always had. Chen Wei sat in his quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel Harmony, staring at the official notice of termination that glowed on his datapad. Around him, packed boxes contained 3 years of his life working to build bridges between Earth and the Galactic Council. Sergeant lay at his feet, his head resting on his paws, sensing his human's distress even if he couldn't understand its source. The door chimed, and Lieutenant Sarah Park entered, her face a mixture of anger and sympathy. She'd served as Chen's aide throughout his tenure, and she was one of the few who understood what Sergeant meant to him. Sir, the transport to Earth is ready. We can leave within the hour. Chen didn't look up from the datapad. 3 years, Sarah. 3 years of careful negotiation, of building trust, of proving that humanity deserves a seat at the table. All undone because they think my dog is ugly. Sarah knelt down to pet Sergeant, who immediately perked up and licked her hand. It's not just about Sergeant, sir. You know that. They've been looking for a reason to diminish Earth's influence since we joined. We're too unpredictable for them, too emotional, too willing to challenge their precious order. Before Chen could respond, his communication console erupted with incoming messages, dozens of them all marked urgent. He frowned and accepted the first call. The holographic image of Captain James Rodriguez from the Earth Defense Fleet materialized above his desk. Ambassador Chen, thank God I reached you. We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. The Vexen Horde has launched a surprise attack on the mining colonies in the Kepler system. Early reports suggest they've already taken 4 stations. Chen felt his blood run cold. The Vexen were a predatory species that the Council had been monitoring for decades, always keeping them at bay through shows of force and careful diplomacy. Have you contacted the Council Defense Fleet? Rodriguez's expression darkened. That's the problem, sir. We sent the distress call 6 hours ago. The Council's response was to schedule an emergency session to discuss the situation. No ships, no aid, just talk. Meanwhile, 3,000 human colonists are under attack. Sarah cursed under her breath. Chen felt a familiar rage building in his chest, the same one he'd barely contained in the Council chamber. They're going to debate while people die? Another call came through, this time from Admiral Catherine Stone, commander of Earth's Deep Space Forces. Her face appeared alongside Rodriguez's hologram. Ambassador, I'm violating about 15 protocols by contacting you directly, but you need to know what's happening. The Council just sent us a formal notice prohibiting any human military response in the Kepler system. They claim it falls under their jurisdiction, and that unilateral action would violate Earth's membership agreement. Chen stood up abruptly, causing Sergeant to jump to his feet as well. The dog sensed the change in his human's demeanor and immediately went on alert. They're using our own treaty against us? While our people are being slaughtered? Admiral Stone nodded grimly. That's the size of it. The Council seems more concerned about maintaining proper procedure than saving lives. Some of my analysts think this might even be a test to see how we respond to their authority. Chen paced his quarters, his mind racing. Sergeant followed him step for step, staying close as he'd been trained to do during stressful situations. The dog's steady presence helped Chen think more clearly, cutting through the anger and fear to find the core problem. How long would it take us to reach Kepler without Council authorization? Chen asked. Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays. If we use the human-developed quantum drives instead of the Council's regulated transit lanes, we could be there in 8 hours. But sir, that would mean ignoring Council authority completely. They'd likely revoke Earth's membership. Sarah spoke up from where she stood near the door. They've already humiliated us over a dog, sir. What more can they take? Chen looked down at Sergeant, who sat patiently looking up at him with those brown eyes that the Council found so disturbing. In them he saw loyalty, trust, and an unconditional acceptance that none of the so-called civilized species had ever shown humanity. An idea began to form in his mind. Audacious and potentially catastrophic, but possibly their only real option. Admiral Stone, how many ships can you mobilize within the hour? Chen asked. The Admiral's eyes widened slightly. For an unauthorized rescue operation? I can get you 30 combat-capable vessels and twice that many support ships. But Ambassador, if we do this, there's no going back. Earth will be in direct defiance of Council authority. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. The Council made it clear yesterday that they don't see us as equals. They see us as subordinates to be managed, primitives to be tolerated as long as we follow their rules. Maybe it's time we reminded them who they're dealing with. Humans don't abandon their own, and we don't let bureaucracy get people killed. Another message came through, this one from the Galactic Council itself. High Arbiter Zelmoth's stone face appeared in the hologram. Ambassador Chen Wei, we are aware of the situation in the Kepler system. The Council wishes to remind Earth that any military action without authorization will be considered an act of aggression against Council authority. You are ordered to stand down and allow proper channels to address this crisis. Chen stared at the hologram for a long moment, then reached down to scratch Sergeant behind the ears. The simple act of touching his dog, of feeling that soft fur and seeing that trusting face, gave him the courage to do what he knew was right. High Arbiter, with all due respect, you can take your proper channels and shove them into a black hole. Humanity will not stand by while our people die because you're too concerned with following procedure. Consider this Earth's formal notice. We're done asking permission to protect our own. Zelmoth's expression didn't change, but there was a long pause before he responded. You understand what you are doing, Ambassador? Earth will be expelled from the Galactic Council. You will lose access to our technology, our trade networks, our protection. Chen felt Sergeant lean against his leg, offering silent support. We're humans, High Arbiter. We got this far without you, and we'll keep going without you if we have to. The difference between us and you is that we know what's really valuable. It's not your fancy technology or your prestigious council membership. It's knowing that when one of us is in trouble, the rest of us come running. Even if they tell us not to, even if they think we're too ugly or too primitive or too emotional to matter. He terminated the connection before the High Arbiter could respond. Sarah was grinning fiercely, and both Rodriguez and Admiral Stone looked energized in their holograms. All ships, Chen ordered, feeling more certain of his decision with each passing second. Plot a course for the Kepler system. Maximum speed. We're bringing our people home. As the crew scrambled to execute the order, Chen knelt beside Sergeant one more time. Well, boy, looks like we're both unemployed now. But at least we'll go down doing the right thing. Sergeant's tail wagged, and he barked once sharply. It was a sound the Council found primitive and disturbing. To Chen, it was the sound of absolute loyalty, the kind that didn't calculate costs or worry about consequences. Maybe that made them ugly by galactic standards, but right now ugly felt pretty damn good. The human fleet emerged from quantum space like avenging angels, their ships blazing with energy signatures that made the Vexen attackers pause in confusion. The Kepler mining colonies hung in space ahead, their outer structures burning and venting atmosphere. Distress signals screamed across every frequency, painting a picture of desperate last stands and failing life support systems. Aboard the flagship Defiance, Chen stood on the bridge with Sergeant at his side. The dog wore a specially designed pressure suit that Sarah had modified, complete with a transparent helmet that let him see clearly. It was technically against regulations to have an animal on a combat bridge, but then again, they were already breaking about 100 more serious regulations. Tactical report, Chen ordered, falling naturally into a command role despite being a diplomat by training. Commander Julia Torres pulled up holographic displays showing the battle space. 16 Vexen heavy cruisers, approximately 40 fighter craft, and what looks like a command dreadnought hanging back near the fourth moon. They've got boarding parties on stations Alpha through Delta. Life signs show civilians are still holding out in reinforced sections, but they won't last much longer. Admiral Stone's voice came through from her flagship Victory. Ambassador, the Vexen are hailing us. They seem confused about why human military vessels are here without council authorization. Chen allowed himself a cold smile. Put them through. The view screen flickered, showing a Vexen commander whose insectoid features were arranged in what might have been surprise. The Vexen were fearsome predators, evolved from hive-minded hunters on a brutal death world. Their reputation throughout the galaxy was one of ruthless efficiency and casual cruelty. Human vessel, the Vexen commander chittered through the translation system. You violate Council space protocols. Withdraw immediately or face consequences. These colonies are now Vexen territory, claimed by right of conquest. Chen stepped forward and Sergeant moved with him, the dog's posture alerting to the threat, even though he couldn't understand the alien language. This is Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth. Those stations contain human civilians under Earth's protection. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces and release all captives. If you refuse, we will remove you by force. The Vexen commander's mandibles clicked in what translated as laughter. You threaten us? The Council will crush you for this violation, and your forces are outnumbered. We have fought Council species for centuries. Your primitive vessels will break like eggshells against our hulls. Sergeant growled low in his chest, a sound that rumbled through the bridge. It was instinctive, the response of a predator recognizing another predator's challenge. Chen reached down and placed a hand on his head, feeling the dog's tension. 30 seconds, Chen repeated calmly. Starting now. The Vexen commander terminated the connection, probably to consult with his fleet. Chen turned to Commander Torres. Order all ships to combat readiness. Target their weapons systems first. I want to disable, not destroy if possible. But if they force our hand, we respond with overwhelming force. Sarah appeared at his elbow, holding a data pad. Sir, I'm receiving messages from other human colonies throughout the sector. Word has spread about what we're doing. They're asking if they should mobilize their own defense forces. Chen considered this carefully. This was the moment where a diplomatic incident could become a full-scale revolution against Council authority. But as he looked at the burning stations on the view screen, at the life signs growing weaker by the minute, the choice seemed clear. Tell them to stand ready, but hold position unless attacked. If the Council wants to escalate this, that's their choice. But we're not going to start a war. We're going to save our people. The 30 seconds elapsed with no response from the Vexen. Chen nodded to Torres. Execute attack pattern Delta. All ships engage. What happened next would be discussed in military academies for generations to come. The human fleet, using tactics and technology developed independently of Council oversight, tore through the Vexen formation like a plasma blade through tissue paper. Earth's quantum drives allowed for micro-jumps that positioned ships exactly where they needed to be. Kinetic weapons, considered crude by Council standards, proved devastatingly effective against Vexen shields calibrated for energy weapons. The Defiance led the charge, with Chen coordinating fleet movements while Sergeant stood alert beside him. The dog seemed to understand that something important was happening, and his presence kept Chen grounded, preventing the rush of combat from clouding his judgment. Their command dreadnought is trying to escape, Torres reported. Should we pursue? Chen shook his head. Let them run. Our priority is the civilians. All ships begin rescue operations. I want every human off those stations within the hour. As the human forces moved in to extract the colonists, something unexpected happened. The station commanders, instead of simply evacuating, began activating systems that the Council didn't know existed. Hidden weapons arrays emerged from what looked like simple mining equipment. Defensive shields powered up from generators that had been disguised as processing facilities. Admiral Stone's voice carried a note of pride. Sir, the colonists are reporting they held off the Vexen boarding parties using improvised weapons and tactics. Apparently, they've been training in secret, expecting that someday the Council's protection wouldn't be enough. Chen felt a surge of pride in his species. Humanity had learned long ago not to depend entirely on others for their survival. Even while playing by the Council's rules, they'd been preparing for the day those rules failed them. Within 45 minutes, every human civilian was safely aboard rescue vessels. The Vexen fleet had retreated, leaving behind 3 disabled cruisers that the humans towed into custody. Not a single human life had been lost in the rescue operation, though several colonists had been injured during the initial attack. As the fleet prepared to depart the system, Chen received an incoming transmission. It was High Arbiter Zelmoth, and his stone face somehow managed to convey extreme displeasure. Ambassador Chen Wei, you have committed an act of war against Council authority. Earth's membership is hereby revoked, effective immediately. All human vessels are ordered to return to Sol System and remain there pending further judgment. Trade sanctions will be imposed, and all Council technology previously shared with humanity is to be returned. Chen looked down at Sergeant, who had settled at his feet, tired but content. The dog had watched the entire battle with calm attention, never panicking, never running, just being there. Just like humanity itself. High Arbiter, we're guilty as charged. We defied your orders, violated your protocols, and saved 3,000 lives while you debated proper procedure. If that makes us criminals in your eyes, then I guess we're criminals. But here's what I think you don't understand about humans. We don't need your permission to exist. We don't need your technology to survive. And we definitely don't need your approval to do what's right. He paused, scratching Sergeant's ears. You banished my dog because you thought he was ugly. You banished my species because you think we're too primitive, too emotional, too unpredictable. Maybe you're right. But you know what? That ugly, primitive, emotional unpredictability just saved 3,000 lives while your beautiful, advanced, logical civilization sat in a committee meeting. Zelmoth was silent for a long moment. You realize you have made Earth an outcast, Ambassador. Without Council protection, you will be vulnerable to any species that wishes to prey upon you. Chen smiled, and it was genuinely warm this time. Let them try. Any species that wants to test humanity will learn the same lesson the Vexen just did. We're not as weak as we look, and we fight a hell of a lot harder when someone threatens our own. As the transmission ended, Sarah approached with reports from throughout human space. Sir, you need to see this. Colonies across the sector are declaring independence from Council oversight. They're forming something they're calling the Human Alliance, and they want you to lead it. Chen looked at the reports, then down at Sergeant, who yawned widely, showing those teeth the Council found so disturbing. Well, boy, looks like we've accidentally started a revolution. Think we're up for it? Sergeant's tail wagged, and he barked once. That was good enough for Chen. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler system, and the galaxy was adjusting to a new reality. The Human Alliance had grown to encompass not just the outer colonies, but nearly every human settlement beyond Sol. What had started as a rescue mission had become a full declaration of independence from Galactic Council. Authority Chen Wei found himself in a position he'd never imagined, serving as the first Chancellor of the Human Alliance. His office on the newly established capital station, Unity, was modest by Council standards but felt overwhelming to him. Sergeant had adapted better than Chen had, finding comfortable spots near every workstation and greeting every visitor with the same friendly enthusiasm that had so horrified the Council. The dog was currently sprawled across a cushion near the window, watching the flow of ships outside with lazy interest. Sarah knocked and entered, her expression troubled. We've got a situation developing, Chancellor. 3 alien vessels just emerged at the edge of our space. They're not Vexen, and they're not broadcasting Council identification codes. Chen felt his stomach tighten. Ever since the Kepler incident, they'd been waiting for the other shoe to drop. The Council had imposed strict sanctions on humanity, prohibiting any member species from trading with or assisting human colonies. So far, most species had complied, leaving humanity isolated but not yet desperate. Battle stations? Chen asked. Sarah shook her head. That's the strange part. They're hailing us on diplomatic channels. The lead ship identifies itself as the Draken Unity, representing the Draconeer sovereignty. They're requesting permission to dock and meet with you personally. Chen frowned. The Draconeer were a warrior species, reptilian in appearance and fierce in reputation. They'd been part of the Council for centuries but had always been somewhat independent, often questioning Council decisions. Do we have any intel on their intentions? Before Sarah could answer, Admiral Stone's hologram appeared. Chancellor, I've been analyzing the Draconeer ships. They're heavily armed, but their weapons are powered down. Their shields are at minimum. If they wanted to attack, they're doing a terrible job of preparing for it. Chen made a decision. Grant them docking permission, but keep our defenses ready. Sarah, get a security detail ready. And someone get Sergeant's diplomatic vest on him. Sergeant perked up at the sound of his name, his tail starting to wag. Chen had to smile despite his tension. The dog had become something of a symbol for the human alliance. His image appearing on recruitment posters with slogans like "Loyal to the End" and "Too Ugly to Quit." What the Council had meant as an insult, humanity had embraced as a badge of honor. 20 minutes later, Chen stood in the main diplomatic hall with Sergeant at his side, both dressed in their formal attire. The Draconeer delegation entered, led by a massive female whose scales gleamed like polished emeralds. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, with intelligent golden eyes that swept the room before settling on Chen and Sergeant. To everyone's surprise, she immediately dropped to one knee, her clawed hand over her chest in what Chen recognized as a Draconeer gesture of respect. Her delegation followed suit. "Chancellor Chen Wei," she said in surprisingly good English, foregoing the translation system. "I am Commander Sirath of the Draconeer Sovereignty. I come bearing an offer of alliance and a confession of shame." Chen gestured for them to rise, genuinely confused. "Commander, please stand. I'm honored by your respect, but I'm not sure I understand." Sirath rose to her full height, and Chen noticed her eyes were fixed on Sergeant, who sat calmly observing the alien visitors. "Chancellor, my people have watched what transpired at Kepler with great interest. We saw how you defied the Council to save your own. We saw how you chose loyalty over politics, action over debate, and we saw the Council's response to your courage." She stepped closer, and Sergeant stood up, alert but not aggressive. Chen placed a hand on his head, ready to intervene if needed. But Sirath slowly extended her clawed hand toward the dog, palm up in a gesture of peace. "Among the Draconeer, we have a saying, judge a species not by their ships or their weapons, but by how they treat those who depend on them. When the Council banished this loyal creature for being ugly, we saw their true nature. When you chose to keep him despite the political cost, we saw yours." Sergeant, after a moment's hesitation, stepped forward and sniffed Sirath's hand. Then, to everyone's amazement, he licked it once before returning to Chen's side. Sirath's expression, difficult to read on reptilian features, seemed to soften. "My people have grown weary of the Council's hypocrisy," Sirath continued. "They speak of civilization and advancement, yet they let innocents die rather than violate procedure. They preach equality, yet they treat species like humans as subordinates. They claim moral authority, yet they judge a creature's worth by its appearance." Sarah stepped forward with data pads. "Commander, are you saying the Draconeer Sovereignty wishes to ally with humanity?" Sirath nodded, her scales rustling. "More than that. We wish to formally withdraw from the Galactic Council and join the Human Alliance. We bring with us 12 colony worlds, a fleet of 200 warships and manufacturing capabilities that will help humanity break free from dependence on Council technology." Chen felt his heart racing. This changed everything. An alliance with a major species like the Draconeer would legitimize the Human Alliance in ways nothing else could. But he had to understand their full motivations. "Commander, forgive my bluntness, but why? Why throw away centuries of Council membership for a species you've barely interacted with?" Sirath's golden eyes met his steadily. "Because we recognize kindred spirits when we see them. The Draconeer were once enslaved by a more powerful species. We fought for our freedom and won it through courage and determination, not permission or politics. When we joined the Council, we hoped to find equals. Instead, we found a bureaucracy that values order over justice and appearance over substance." She gestured to Sergeant, who had settled back at Chen's feet. "This creature, this dog you call Sergeant, represents everything the Council fears about humanity. Loyalty without calculation, courage without hesitation, love without conditions. These are not weaknesses, Chancellor. These are the foundation of true strength." One of the other Draconeer delegates stepped forward, a smaller male with darker scales. "We have been monitoring your communications, Chancellor. We know that other species are watching what humanity does. The Metherians are questioning Council authority in their sectors. The Yulan Collective has begun secret negotiations with your outer colonies. Even some of the Crystalline Collective's younger generations are expressing admiration for humanity's independence." Chen absorbed this information carefully. You're saying we've started something bigger than just human independence? Syrath's mouth curved in what might have been a smile, showing rows of sharp teeth that would have terrified the Council. You've shown the galaxy that the Council's authority is not absolute, that their rules are not sacred. That species have the right to determine their own paths, even if the Council disapproves. Especially if the Council disapproves. Sarah was already calculating the strategic implications. If the Draconeer join us and other species follow, we could fundamentally reshape the power structure of the galaxy. Syrath nodded. That is precisely what my sovereignty hopes to accomplish. But we will not do this without knowing we stand with beings of true honor. So I must ask Chancellor Chenwei, what are your intentions? Do you seek merely to survive independent of the Council, or do you envision something greater? Chen looked down at Sergeant, who gazed back with those brown eyes that had started all of this. In them, he saw the same uncomplicated loyalty and trust that had sustained him through the darkest moments. The galaxy thought they were ugly, primitive, emotional. Maybe they were. But those qualities had brought them this far. Commander Syrath, humanity doesn't want to conquer or dominate. We're not looking to replace the Council with another oppressive authority. But we believe in something different than they do. We believe that loyalty matters more than efficiency. That saving lives matters more than following rules. That judging others by their character matters more than judging them by their appearance. He stood straighter, feeling the weight of the moment. If the Draconeer sovereignty shares these values, then yes, we would be honored to call you allies. And if other species want to join us in building something better than the Council, we'll welcome them too, not as subjects or subordinates, but as equals working toward a common goal. Syrath extended her clawed hand toward Chen, who grasped it firmly despite the size difference. Then let it be known throughout the galaxy. The Draconeer sovereignty and the human alliance stand together. Let those who value freedom over authority, justice over procedure, and character over appearance join us. A new age begins today. As formal documents were prepared and the historic alliance was finalized, Sergeant wandered over to the Draconeer delegates. The warriors, each one a trained killer capable of tearing through steel with their bare claws, gathered around the dog with gentle curiosity. They took turns carefully petting him, their dangerous hands remarkably gentle, while Sergeant accepted their attention with his usual good-natured patience. Sarah watched the scene and laughed quietly. Who would have thought? The ugly dog, the Council banished, is now the galaxy's most effective diplomat. Chen smiled, watching Sergeant bring together two species through nothing more than his simple, honest nature. Maybe that's exactly why they feared him, Sarah. He represents something they can't control or predict. 6 months after the Draconeer alliance, the human alliance had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 17 species had formally withdrawn from the Galactic Council to join what was now being called the Free People's Coalition. Unity Station had expanded 3 times to accommodate the flood of diplomatic missions, trade delegations, and military coordination offices. But success had brought new challenges, and Chen found himself facing the biggest one yet in an emergency session of the Coalition Council. Representatives from member species filled the chamber, their varied forms creating a chaotic but vibrant assembly that was nothing like the sterile order of the Galactic Council. The problem was the Vexen. After their defeat at Kepler, they'd regrouped and launched coordinated attacks on 3 coalition colonies simultaneously. Early reports suggested they'd received support from the Galactic Council itself, though proving it was another matter entirely. Commander Syrath stood at the strategic display, her claws pointing to holographic star systems. The attacks were too well coordinated to be coincidence. The Vexen hit our supply lines, communication hubs, and defensive installations with precision that suggests they had detailed intelligence. Intelligence they could only have gotten from Council sources. A Matharian representative, a crystalline being named Chorus, chimed in with harmonious tones. The Council fears what we represent. They see species leaving their authority in growing numbers. If they cannot stop us through diplomacy, they will attempt to destroy us through proxy warfare. Chen stood at the head of the Council table with Sergeant beside him. The dog had become such a fixture at these meetings that no one questioned his presence anymore. In fact, several species had begun bringing their own companion animals or comfort objects, something that would have been unthinkable in the sterile Galactic Council. The question is how we respond, Chen said. We could strike back at Vexen bases, but that might be exactly what the Council wants. Give them an excuse to paint us as the aggressors. Admiral Stone's hologram appeared. Chancellor, we've intercepted encrypted communications between the Council and the Vexen High Command. I'm sending the decoded files now. It's worse than we thought. The files appeared on everyone's displays and the room fell silent as they read. The Galactic Council hadn't just provided intelligence to the Vexen. They'd offered them conquered Coalition territory, promised them Council membership, and supplied them with advanced weapons specifically designed to counter Coalition defenses. A Yulon delegate, resembling a massive floating jellyfish, pulsed an angry purple. This is an act of war. The Council has declared war on us without having the courage to do it openly. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Chen could feel the mood shifting toward violent retaliation, and he understood the impulse. But as his hand rested on Sergeant's head, feeling the dog's steady breathing, he remembered what made the Coalition different from the Council in the first place. We don't respond the same way they act, Chen said firmly. The Council wants us to become what they claim we already are. Violent, unpredictable barbarians. If we strike back in anger, we prove them right, and lose the moral authority that brought 17 species to our cause. Sirath's scales rustled with frustration. Chancellor, with respect, sometimes violence is the only language aggressors understand. The Draconeer learned this lesson centuries ago. Before Chen could respond, an unexpected voice spoke up. It was Representative Cathix of the Whisper Folk, one of the more recent species to join the Coalition. His ethereal form barely maintained cohesion, a sign of extreme emotion. Perhaps, Cathix's voice whispered through the translation system, we are thinking about this incorrectly. The Council's greatest weapon has never been their military might. It has been their image as the civilized authorities of the galaxy. What if we attack that instead? Sarah, who'd been monitoring communications, suddenly looked up with wide eyes. Chancellor, you need to see this. News of the Council's deal with the Vexen has leaked. Not just to Coalition members, but to every major information network in the galaxy. Someone bypassed Council censorship protocols and broadcast the entire file dump. Chen looked at Cathix with new respect. The Whisper Folk have always been excellent with information systems. Would you know anything about this leak? Cathix's form shimmered, which Chen had learned was the Whisper Folk equivalent of a smile. I know only that information wishes to be free, Chancellor, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simply the truth. The chamber erupted in discussion as representatives checked their own networks. The leaked files were everywhere, spreading faster than the Council could possibly contain them. Species throughout the galaxy were reading proof that their supposedly benevolent Council had conspired with raiders to attack innocent colonies. Admiral Stone's expression in her hologram was grim but satisfied. Chancellor, we're receiving communications from dozens of Council member species. Many are demanding explanations. Some are threatening to withdraw from the Council themselves. This leak has created a political crisis on a scale I've never seen. Chen felt Sergeant lean against his leg, and he drew strength from that simple contact. This is our moment, then. Not to attack, but to offer an alternative. Sarah, open channels to every major population center in the galaxy. I want this broadcast to reach everyone. 10 minutes later, Chen stood before cameras that would transmit his message to trillions of beings across countless worlds. Sergeant sat beside him, calm and steady as always. Chen had specifically requested that the dog be visible in the frame. Let the galaxy see what the Council had rejected. My name is Chen Wei, Chancellor of the Free People's Coalition. 6 months ago, I stood before the Galactic Council as Earth's ambassador. I was given an ultimatum: abandon my service dog or lose my position. The Council called him ugly, primitive, and unsuitable for civilized company. He reached down to rest his hand on Sergeant's head. I chose my dog, and in doing so I learned something important about the Council. They value appearance over substance, procedure over justice, authority over truth. When humans needed help at Kepler System, the Council scheduled meetings while people died. When we saved our own people, they punished us for violating their protocols. The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing both Chen and Sergeant clearly. Now we've learned that the Council has armed raiders to attack Coalition colonies. They've conspired to murder civilians because those civilians dared to choose independence, and they did all of this while maintaining their facade of civilized authority. Chen's voice hardened. The leaked files prove what many species have long suspected. The Council doesn't exist to protect or serve its members. It exists to maintain power over them, to keep them dependent, controlled, and subordinate. They fear independence because independent beings might question their authority. They fear diversity because diverse perspectives might challenge their rigid order. He paused, letting his words sink in across the galaxy. The Free People's Coalition offers a different path. We don't demand conformity or submission. We don't judge species by how they look or how closely they follow our rules. We believe that every species has the right to determine their own future, to protect their own people, to live according to their own values. Sergeant, perhaps sensing the importance of the moment, stood up and barked once. It was a clear, strong sound that the council would have found disturbing. To Chen it was perfect. This dog was banished for being ugly. Our species was punished for being emotional. Other coalition members were marginalized for being too independent, too different, too unwilling to blindly follow authority. But we've learned that these supposed weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths. Because we understand something the council has forgotten. True civilization isn't about uniformity or control. It's about respecting differences while standing together when it matters. Chen looked directly into the camera. To every species watching this, whether you're in the council or not, we invite you to make a choice. You can continue to live under an authority that values your obedience over your dignity, or you can join us in building something better, something where loyalty matters more than appearance, where protecting the innocent matters more than following procedure, where beings are judged by their character, not their conformity. As the broadcast ended, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Communication channels lit up with messages from council member species requesting information about joining the coalition. News networks across the galaxy replayed the broadcast, focusing particularly on the image of Chen standing with Sergeant. The dog that the council had deemed too ugly for civilized society had become the face of a galactic revolution. Sirath approached Chen as he left the broadcast studio. That was masterfully done, Chancellor. You've turned the council's own hypocrisy into our greatest weapon. Chen smiled tiredly, scratching Sergeant's ears. I just told the truth. Sometimes that's all you need to do. Sarah rushed up with her datapad, her something re. 1 year after the banishment, Unity Station had become the most diverse gathering place in the known galaxy. Where the Galactic Council's chambers had been sterile and rigidly organized, the Coalition's halls were alive with color, sound, and the beautiful chaos of dozens of species living and working together. Chen walked through the main concourse with Sergeant, watching the daily miracle of galactic cooperation. A Draconeer warrior played a strategy game with a Metherian crystalline being. Yulan merchants haggled with human traders in a mix of languages and gestures. Whisper folk children, their ethereal forms barely coherent, chased a group of human kids and Draconeer hatchlings in an improvised game of tag. What struck Chen most was how many species had brought their own companion animals and creatures. Inspired by Sergeant's story, beings throughout the coalition had begun introducing their own version of emotional support creatures. The concourse was dotted with exotic animals from 100 worlds, and somehow, they all seemed to get along better than the council's diplomats ever had. Sarah caught up to him, slightly out of breath. Chancellor, we have a situation. High Arbiter Zelmoth is here. He's requesting a private meeting with you. Chen stopped walking, surprised. He's here? At Unity Station? I thought the council considered us enemies. Sarah nodded. Apparently he came alone in an unmarked ship. Our sensors almost missed him. He's invoking ancient diplomatic protocols, requesting sanctuary and parley. We're legally obligated to grant it, but security wants to know how to proceed. Chen thought for a moment, then smiled. Tell security to treat him exactly how we'd treat any other diplomatic visitor. No special accommodations, no extra security theater, just basic courtesy. And Sarah, prepare conference room 7. Sarah's eyes widened. Sir, room 7 is the one with all the animals. The Yulan are conducting their social bonding exercises there. Chen's smile widened. Exactly. If the High Arbiter wants to meet with me, he can do it in the real coalition, not some sanitized version we put together for his comfort. 20 minutes later, Chen entered conference room 7 with Sergeant. The space was indeed filled with various creatures. A Yulan's tentacled companion floated in a specialized tank. Several Draconeer had brought their spine-backed lizards that served as hunting partners. A Metherian had somehow bonded with a creature that looked like a floating ball of light. And in the corner, a human child sat reading to what appeared to be a small dragon. High Arbiter Zelmoth stood in the center of this menagerie, his stone features managing to convey extreme discomfort. The ancient being who had witnessed millennia of galactic history looked genuinely disturbed by the casual chaos around him. Chen gestured for Zelmoth to sit at the conference table, deliberately choosing a spot near where a Draconeer's lizard was sunbathing. "High Arbiter, this is unexpected. I thought the council considered me a criminal and a traitor." Zelmoth sat carefully, his stone form making the chair creak. His eyes followed Sergeant as the dog settled at Chen's feet, then scanned the room full of animals with barely concealed distaste. "Chancellor Chen, I have come to admit that the council made a grave error in judgment, not just regarding your dog or Earth's membership, but in our fundamental approach to governance." This was so unexpected that Chen simply stared for a moment. "You're admitting the council was wrong?" Zelmoth nodded slowly. "The past year has been catastrophic for council authority. 37 species have withdrawn from our membership. Trade networks we spent centuries building have collapsed. Our military forces are stretched thin dealing with opportunistic raiders. And most damaging of all, we've lost something we can never recover: our moral authority." The High Arbiter looked directly at Sergeant, who returned the gaze with calm brown eyes. "I have lived for 6,000 years, Chancellor. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed species evolve and go extinct. But in all that time, I have never seen such a rapid and complete collapse of established order. And it all began when we banished an ugly dog from our chambers." Chen felt Sergeant lean against his leg. "With respect, High Arbiter, it didn't begin with Sergeant. It began with centuries of the Council prioritizing appearances over substance, control over freedom, conformity over diversity. Sergeant was just the catalyst that revealed what was already breaking." One of the Draconeer's lizards wandered over and sniffed at Zelmoth's stone foot. The ancient Arbiter looked down at it with an expression of confusion and mild alarm. "I have come to understand that. The Council believed that civilization required uniformity, that progress demanded conformity to our standards. We thought that by eliminating what we considered primitive or ugly, we were elevating the galaxy to a higher state." He gestured around the room at the various animals and their bonded beings. "Instead, we created sterility. We built a civilization that was efficient and orderly, but hollow. A galaxy where beings followed rules not because they believed in them, but because they feared the consequences of deviation." Sarah entered quietly with refreshments. Carefully stepping around a Yulan's floating companion, she placed a glass of water in front of Zelmoth, who nodded his thanks. "The Coalition has shown me what we lost," Zelmoth continued. "This chaos, this disorder, this acceptance of beings so different they should have no common ground. Yet somehow it works. Species that would never have interacted under Council protocols are now allies, friends, partners, and it's all held together by something we couldn't quantify or control: genuine loyalty and mutual respect." Chen leaned forward. "High Arbiter, why are you really here? Not to apologize, I think. The Council doesn't do apologies." Zelmoth was quiet for a long moment, watching as the human child in the corner giggled at something her dragon companion did. "The Council is dying, Chancellor. Not quickly, not dramatically, but inevitably. Too many species have seen that there's an alternative. Too many beings have realized they don't need our permission to live free. Within a generation, perhaps two, the Galactic Council will be nothing but a historical footnote." He turned his ancient gaze back to Chen. "I have come to ask for sanctuary, Chancellor. Not for myself, I am too old and too complicit in the Council's failures, but for my people, the eternal observers. We number only in the thousands now, and when the Council falls, we will have nowhere to go. We have no colonies of our own, no military forces, nothing but our knowledge and our memories of 6,000 years of history." Chen felt the weight of this request. The eternal observers were one of the most ancient species in the galaxy, their long lives making them repositories of knowledge that would be irreplaceable if lost. But they were also the architects of the Council's most oppressive policies. Sergeant, seeming to sense Chen's indecision, stood up and walked over to Zelmoth. The dog sniffed the stone being carefully, then did something that shocked everyone in the room. He placed his head on Zelmoth's knee, a gesture of comfort and acceptance. The High Arbiter looked down at the dog with an expression of wonder. "I called him ugly. I said he had no place among civilized beings. And yet here he is offering comfort to someone who tried to banish him." Chen smiled softly. "That's what you never understood about beings like Sergeant High Arbiter. They don't hold grudges. They don't calculate costs and benefits. They just respond to the moment with honest emotion. Maybe that's what makes them beautiful. Zelmoth carefully, hesitantly placed one stone hand on Sergeant's head. The dog's tail wagged gently, accepting the touch. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. For 6,000 years, I thought I knew what civilization should look like. Clean lines, perfect order. Beings acting according to logic and protocol. Now I see a room full of chaos, noise, and creatures that defy classification, and I realize this is more alive than anything the Council ever created. He looked up at Chen. Will you grant sanctuary to my people, Chancellor? We have nothing to offer but our knowledge and our promise to learn from our mistakes. We cannot undo 6,000 years of rigid control, but perhaps we can help ensure the Coalition doesn't repeat our errors. Chen considered carefully. This decision would affect the entire Coalition, and he couldn't make it alone. I'll present your request to the Coalition Council High Arbiter, but I can't promise the outcome. Many species suffered under Council policies that your people helped create. Some may not be ready to forgive. Zelmoth nodded. That is more than fair, Chancellor. And it is more mercy than we showed others. If the Coalition rejects us, at least we will have learned a final lesson. That justice sometimes means accepting the consequences of our actions. As Zelmoth stood to leave, still carefully petting Sergeant, something remarkable happened. The various animals in the room, which had largely ignored the ancient being, suddenly gathered around him. The Draconeer's lizards, the Yulan's tentacled companion, even the child's small dragon all approached with curious, friendly interest. The High Arbiter looked around at the menagerie with an expression that might have been the stone equivalent of tears. They sense no threat from me. These creatures you all love, they judge based on the present moment, not past actions or future consequences. What a simple, profound wisdom. After Zelmoth left with an escort, Sarah turned to Chen. Sir, do you really think the Coalition will accept the Eternal Observers? Observers? Chen looked down at Sergeant, who had returned to his side. I think if we've learned anything this past year, it's that everyone deserves a second chance, even those who denied others that same chance. Besides, the whole point of the Coalition is that we're better than the Council. That means being better even when it's hard. Sergeant barked in agreement, and the other animals in the room joined in with their own species-specific sounds. The cacophony was loud, chaotic, and utterly lacking in the order the Council had prized. It was perfect. Commander Sirath entered the room, her scales gleaming. Chancellor, the Coalition Council is ready to hear High Arbiter Zelmoth's request. They've asked that you present the case yourself. Chen stood, straightening his jacket. Then I guess it's time to prove whether we really mean what we say about second chances and judging beings by their character, rather than their past. As he walked toward the council chamber with Sergeant at his side, Chen reflected on how far they'd come. A year ago, he'd been facing unemployment for refusing to abandon his dog. Now he was about to argue for sanctuary for the very being who'd tried to banish them both. The galaxy was full of surprises, and somehow the ugly dog at his side had helped reveal the beauty in all of them. 5 years had passed since the day Sergeant was banished from the Galactic Council chambers. Unity Station had grown into a thriving capital of what was now called the Galactic Free Alliance, encompassing over 60 species and controlling nearly half the known galaxy's inhabited worlds. The old Galactic Council still existed, but it was a shadow of its former self, comprising only 12 species who clung to the old ways. Chen Wei, now elder statesman of the Alliance rather than active chancellor, sat in his private garden on Unity Station. The garden was a mix of plants from dozens of worlds, a living symbol of diversity thriving together. Beside him, moving slower now with age, Sergeant lay in a patch of sunlight. The dog's muzzle had gone gray, and he spent more time sleeping than he once had, but his eyes still held that same loyal warmth. Sarah, now ambassador-at-large for the Alliance, found Chen there. She'd aged too, with streaks of silver in her hair, but her energy remained undiminished. You asked to see me, sir? Chen smiled. He'd asked her to stop calling him sir years ago, but some habits died hard. I wanted to show you something. He handed her a datapad with historical records. Sarah scrolled through, her eyes widening. This is the original footage from the day Sergeant was banished. I haven't seen this in years. Why now? Chen reached down to stroke Sergeant's head gently. Because the Alliance Council voted this morning to establish a new holiday. They're calling it Liberation Day, commemorating the moment that sparked the revolution, and they want to use that footage as the centerpiece of the memorial. Sarah sat down on the bench beside him, still reading through the files. I remember being so angry that day. The council was so dismissive, so cruel about something that mattered to you. I wanted to rage at them, tell them exactly what I thought of their so-called civilization. Chen nodded. We both did, but looking back now, I'm almost grateful to them. Their cruelty, their narrow-mindedness, it revealed something important not just about them, but about us. It showed us who we wanted to be. A chime sounded and a hologram materialized showing Commander Cyreth, who now led the Alliance's defense forces. Her scales had dulled slightly with age, but she remained as formidable as ever. Elder Chen, I apologize for interrupting, but there's news from the frontier. The Vexen Concordat has formally requested full Alliance membership. Chen raised his eyebrows. The Vexen, once their enemies, had spent the past 5 years rebuilding their society. After the Council abandoned them and their leadership was overthrown, they'd undergone dramatic reforms. But full membership was still surprising. What does the Council think? Chen asked. Sirath's expression was complex. Split, as always. Some remember the attacks on Kepler. Others see a species that has genuinely changed. The deciding vote may come down to you, Elder. Your opinion still carries enormous weight. Chen looked down at Sergeant, remembering the Vexen commander who had threatened them 5 years ago. That commander was dead now, executed by his own people for his crimes. The new Vexen leadership had been born from a revolution inspired partly by watching humanity stand up to the Council. Tell the Council I support their application, Chen said. With conditions, of course. But if we've learned anything, it's that beings can change. That past mistakes don't have to define future possibilities. After Sirath's hologram faded, Sarah smiled. The Council would have never shown that mercy. They would have judged the Vexen by their worst actions and refused to see anything else. Chen nodded. That's why we're different. That's why we're better. He paused, watching Sergeant's steady breathing. You know what the Council never understood? Why Sergeant mattered so much to me. They thought it was just emotion, just irrational human sentiment. Sarah waited, knowing Chen had more to say. But Sergeant taught me something that shaped everything we built here. Chen continued. He showed me that loyalty doesn't need to be earned through perfection. That love doesn't require meeting certain standards. That value isn't determined by appearance or utility. Every species in the Alliance, every reform we've made, every policy we've implemented, it all comes back to lessons I learned from an ugly dog who loved me just because I existed. Movement at the garden entrance made them both look up. A group of children approached, representing at least a dozen different species. They were students from the Alliance's new integrated school system, where young beings from different worlds learned together. The teacher, a Matharian named Harmony, chimed apologetically. Elder Chen, I'm so sorry to intrude, but the children have been studying the founding of the Alliance, and they asked if they could meet Sergeant. I told them it was probably not appropriate, but they were so insistent. Chen smiled warmly. It's fine, Harmony. Sergeant loves children. The dog had already perked up, his tail wagging slowly as the youngsters approached. They gathered around him with reverent care, their various hands, claws, and appendages reaching out to gently pet him. A small Draconeer hatchling, scales gleaming emerald green, looked up at Chen with golden eyes full of wonder. Elder Chen, is it true that the whole Alliance started because of Sergeant? The hatchling asked in careful standard. Chen nodded. In a way, yes. The old council said he was too ugly to be allowed in civilized spaces. They gave me a choice, abandon him or lose everything. I chose him, and that choice showed others that there was an alternative to the council's way of doing things. A human child, no more than 8 years old, spoke up. My mom says Sergeant is a hero. She says he changed the galaxy. Sarah laughed softly. Your mom is right, though I don't think he meant to. He was just being himself. One of the Whisper folk children, their form barely coherent, drifted closer. My grandparent says that beings used to be scared to be different, that everyone tried to look and act the same so the council would approve. Is that true? Shen felt a wave of sadness remembering those days. Yes, it's true. The council had very specific ideas about what civilization should look like. If you didn't fit their standards, you were considered lesser, primitive, ugly. A Yulan child floating in their personal aquatic sphere, pulsed with curiosity. But you're all different now. Humans and Draconir and Metharians and everyone. How did Sergeant change that? Chen thought about how to explain it in terms children could understand. Sergeant didn't do anything special. He didn't fight battles or give speeches or make laws. He just existed exactly as he was without trying to be something else. And when the council said that wasn't good enough, that he needed to change or leave, I realized something important. If they couldn't accept a loyal, loving dog just because he didn't match their idea of beauty, then maybe their idea of beauty was wrong. The Draconir hatchling carefully stroked Sergeant's gray muzzle. He is beautiful, though. Look at his eyes. They're kind. Chen felt his throat tighten with emotion. Yes, they are. And you know what? 5 years ago, most adults in the galaxy couldn't see that. They could only see that he didn't look like them, that he was different. But you all see his kindness first. That's the real victory of the Alliance. We're raising a generation that judges others by their character, not their appearance. The teacher, Harmony, chimed softly. Children, we should let Elder Chen and Sergeant rest now. Thank you for your time. As the children reluctantly said their goodbyes, each one carefully petting Sergeant one last time, Chen watched with a full heart. This was the future they'd fought for. Not dominance or revenge against the old council, but a galaxy where younglings of different species could play together, learn together, and see beauty in each other's differences. After they left, Sarah sat quietly for a moment before speaking. Sir, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret how things turned out? You gave up a comfortable position as Earth's ambassador. You started a revolution that cost thousands of lives in various conflicts, all because you wouldn't abandon your dog. Do you ever wonder if it was worth it? Chen looked at Sergeant, who had settled back into his patch of sunlight, tired from the children's attention but content. Every single day I wonder about the cost. Every being who died in the conflicts with the council, every family displaced, every sacrifice made. The weight of that never goes away. He paused, watching the dog's steady breathing. But then I think about those children who just left. They don't see each other as alien or foreign or different in any threatening way. They're just friends who happen to come from different worlds. That's what we fought for. That's what Sergeant represented without even knowing it. The right to be yourself exactly as you are and to be valued for it. Sarah nodded. The Alliance isn't perfect. We still have conflicts, disagreements, species that struggle to understand each other. Chen smiled. Of course we're not perfect. Perfection was the Council's goal, and look where it got them. We're messy and chaotic, and sometimes we make mistakes, but we're honest about it. We don't pretend to have all the answers. We just try to treat each other with the same loyalty and acceptance that Sergeant has always shown me. An alert chimed on Sarah's datapad. She checked it, and her expression became serious. Sir, there's a delegation arriving from the old Galactic Council. They're requesting a formal meeting. It's High Arbiter Zelmoth. Chen stood carefully, his joints protesting slightly. 5 years had aged him more than he cared to admit. Show them to Ro.